There is a place in northern Idaho that most people have never heard of. A small town, a rural community, a landscape of pine forests and lake water that looks like a place people escape to, not a place you escape from. Sydney Sweeney grew up there on a lakeside property a family has owned for 5 generations. She did not grow up poor, but she grew up far from everything, far from Los Angeles, far from the industry, far from the networks of connections and auditions and knowing the right people that most working actors in Hollywood take for granted. She was, in the most literal sense, a small town kid with a dream that the town had absolutely no infrastructure to support. By the time she was 20, she had appeared in Quentin Tarantino's Oscar-winning film and was earning Emmy nominations for 2 of the most critically acclaimed shows on HBO. By 25, she was one of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment, a name that generated click-throughs and magazine covers and paparazzi attention and the kind of discourse, frankly, that follows certain women regardless of their talent, because the culture cannot resist making their bodies the story. By 28, she had done something that genuinely surprised people who thought they knew how this industry worked. She had bought back control of her own narrative. Mostly. The Sydney Sweeney story is, on its surface, the kind of thing that gets turned into a motivational TikTok. Small town girl with big dreams beats the odds, makes it to the top. But the real story is more complicated, more interesting, and considerably more instructive. Because Sydney Sweeney's rise to fame is not just a story about talent, though the talent is real. It is a story about what women in entertainment are allowed to be seen as, and what they are expected to fight to be taken seriously for, and about what it costs to occupy the space between all of those things at once. Sydney Bernice Sweeney was born on September 12, 1997 in Spokane, Washington. She was raised in the Idaho Panhandle in a rural community along the Washington border in a lakeside home that had been in her family for multiple generations. Her father, Stephen Sweeney, worked in healthcare. Her mother, Lisa Mudd Sweeney, was a lawyer. By any standard, this was not the background from which Hollywood stars typically emerge. The casting directors were not coming to rural Idaho. The agents were not scouting at the local school productions. The path from where Sydney was to where she wanted to be required building something from nothing, and she understood that early. She discovered her desire to act at around age 12 when she happened to attend an audition for an independent film shooting in the Spokane area, not as a participant, just as an observer. Something about watching the process clicked for her in a way that she has described in multiple interviews as immediate and irreversible. She wanted to do that. She wanted to do nothing else. And knowing what she was encountering in her parents, a response that might have been expected, skepticism, concern, the usual parental wariness about entertainment careers, she did something remarkable for a 12-year-old. She prepared a 5-year business plan, a structured, written-out proposal for why acting was a viable career path, what the steps were, what the benchmarks would be, and what outcomes she was committed to achieving within the stated time frame. Her parents, who were both professionals with analytical orientations, were sufficiently impressed or sufficiently taken aback that they agreed to let her try. This business plan is more than an anecdote. It tells you something about the way Sydney Sweeney operates that remains visible throughout her career. She thinks systematically. She is not someone who drifts from opportunity to opportunity, or who gets caught up in the momentum of the moment and forgets the larger strategy. She is, and has been from the beginning, someone who understands that a career in entertainment is a business as much as an art, and that the people who last are the ones who treat it that way. This quality, strategic, methodical, long horizon thinking, is not what the entertainment press tends to highlight about her. But it is arguably the most important thing about her. The family temporarily relocated to allow Sydney to begin auditioning in the Seattle and Portland markets. She began booking commercial work and small television roles. Appearances on Heroes in 2009, Criminal Minds in 2009, an episode of 90210 in 2010, a brief appearance on Grey's Anatomy in 2014. The resume of the grinding, unglamorous, slow accumulation phase of a television acting career. Years of auditions, of rejection, of small bookings and smaller paychecks, of maintaining belief in a process that provides very little encouragement to believe in. She moved to Los Angeles at 13 with her family. She continued pursuing roles. She took mixed martial arts training to expand the range of roles she could audition for. She trained in boxing. She studied the craft with the seriousness of someone who intends to be taken seriously. She was, throughout this period, almost entirely invisible to mainstream entertainment coverage. There was no moment of viral discovery, no overnight launch. There was just the work, the auditions, the small credits, the education, practical and otherwise, of someone learning an industry from the inside. The turning point, when it came, was unusual. In 2019, she appeared in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as a minor character, Petra, a young Manson girl encountered briefly during the film's summer 1969 backdrop. The role was not large, the screen time was not significant, but appearing in a Tarantino film, even in a small capacity, carries a particular kind of professional currency. It signals that the director, who is notoriously selective and deeply serious about his casting choices, even for minor roles, saw something worth choosing. People paid attention. In the same year, she was cast in two of HBO's most critically discussed series simultaneously. In Euphoria, she played Cassie Howard, the girl with a reputation for promiscuity who cannot seem to escape the weight of other people's projections about her, who is not simply a victim, but a complicated, sometimes frustrating, sometimes heartbreaking person whose relationship with her own beauty and with the men who respond to it is one of the more honest portrayals of a particular feminine experience in recent television. And in The White Lotus, the first season, she played Olivia Mossbacher, the cold, performatively cynical college girl who weaponizes her intellectual credentials against everyone around her. The two roles were completely different. The dual casting demonstrated a range that the entertainment press was frankly slow to fully register, because the first thing that happened when Sydney Sweeney arrived in public consciousness was not a critical reckoning with the quality of her work. It was a cultural reckoning with her appearance. This is the part of the Sydney Sweeney story that requires the most careful handling, because it is real and it is important and it is something she has addressed directly, but it is also easy to misrepresent in ways that either minimize the legitimate criticism or reduce everything she has achieved to a referendum on her physicality. So let's be precise. Sydney Sweeney is conventionally and significantly attractive. She is aware of this. She has used it strategically, accepting certain brand partnerships and certain roles that trade on that attractiveness, just as most actors of all genders use their physical presentation as a professional resource. None of this is unusual or problematic in itself. What is unusual, and what generated the specific recurring tension that has followed her since she became famous is the gap between how the entertainment press and internet culture responded to her appearance and how they responded to her talent. Subscribe so you can follow the next part of this story, because what Sydney Sweeney said publicly about Hollywood, money, and why she couldn't afford to stop working even after becoming a star is one of the most genuinely revealing statements any working actress has made about the economics of this industry, and it changed the conversation. In a 2023 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Sydney Sweeney said something that landed with unusual force. She said that despite her success, the Emmy nominations, the HBO shows, the brand deals, she could not afford to stop working. She described needing to keep taking projects, keep generating income, because the expenses of maintaining a career at her level, management fees, agency fees, public relations, styling, the costs of the professional infrastructure that visibility requires, consumed the income that the work produced. If I take a 6-month break, she said, I don't have anything. The statement provoked a significant response. Some people were sympathetic. It illuminated, in unusually honest terms, the precarity that exists for working actors even at relatively high levels of success. Others were skeptical or dismissive. What did she mean she couldn't afford to stop working when she was presumably being paid significant amounts? The skeptics were missing the point. What Sydney was describing was not poverty. She was describing a structural reality of the entertainment industry, that the costs of maintaining a public career are enormous, that the fees extracted by the various parties between an actor and their paycheck are substantial, and that the income generated by the kind of work available to someone at her level, primarily television, primarily HBO level projects, does not, in the absence of franchise paydays or extraordinary circumstances, translate into the kind of financial cushion that people imagine when they think about Hollywood success. She also said in the same interview that she wished she had a producing partner at a studio who believed in her, because being an actress, even a successful one, even a 2-time Emmy nominee, puts you in a fundamentally reactive position. You wait for the call, you don't control what the call says, and she didn't want to be in a reactive position. This comment turned out to be more than an expression of frustration. It turned out to be a statement of intent. In 2020, Sydney had already founded 50/50 Films, her production company. In 2023 and 2024, she began actively developing projects through it, not just attaching herself as a producing credit on films that were already happening, but originating projects from early development. She acquired rights to books. She developed pitches. She positioned herself deliberately and methodically to be on the other side of the table where the decisions are actually made. In 2025, Sydney Sweeney appeared in Eden, a survival thriller set in the Galapagos Islands, and Anaconda, a franchise revival that was widely anticipated in advance and received mixed notices but performed commercially. Neither was a prestige project in the Euphoria and the White Lotus mode. Both were movies that demonstrated range and box office viability. And both were, in a sense, strategic rather than purely artistic choices. Steps toward establishing the kind of commercial track record that gives an actress leverage. The discourse around Sydney Sweeney has never fully escaped the question of whether her success is primarily attributable to her talent or to her appearance and the industry machinery around it. This question is asked less frequently about male actors of equivalent or lesser gifts, and the asymmetry is worth noting. What can be said with confidence is this: the acting that she has done in Euphoria and in The White Lotus represents genuinely high-level dramatic work. The Cassie Howard arc in Euphoria's second season, in which Cassie falls catastrophically for the wrong person, destroys her most important friendship in the process, and eventually performs a kind of spectacular public unraveling, required Sydney to sustain complex emotional reality across a full television season in ways that would test any performer. She sustained it. The Emmy nominations were deserved. There is also something worth saying about the gossip ecosystem that has formed around her. The internet, which is very good at building celebrities up and extremely efficient at tearing them down, has generated a sustained and often ugly stream of speculation about Sydney Sweeney's personal life, her relationships, her motives, her authenticity. Some of this falls into the category of normal celebrity coverage. Some of it goes further into a territory that is more specifically directed at women who become famous partly through their physical presentation, a kind of resentful accounting in which the attractiveness is simultaneously the reason she succeeded and the reason her success is illegitimate. What Sydney has done with this is, on balance, impressive. She has not retreated from the conversation. She has not performed the kind of defensive humility that the culture sometimes demands from women in her position. She has been direct about what she has achieved and about what it cost to achieve it. She has made jokes, good ones, about the ways in which the discourse around her reduces her to a body. She has also quietly but consistently gotten better. Her craft has deepened. Her choices have become more interesting. The actress who appeared on Euphoria in 2019 is not the same actress as the one in the projects she is developing in 2025 and 2026. There is more precision, more control, more understanding of what she is doing and why. At 28, Sydney Sweeney has done something rare. She has arrived in the space where talent and strategy and visibility converge, and she has not been destroyed by any of them. The industry that initially read her as a body with some talent has gradually been compelled to reckon with the talent on its own terms. Not because she performed smallness, not because she made herself less, because she insisted over time and through sustained quality of work on being seen as more. There is an interesting question lurking under this story. What would have happened to Sydney Sweeney if she had been less conventionally attractive? Would the first phase of her career have been the same? Probably not. The visibility that came with a particular kind of appearance accelerated things in ways that are not available to everyone with equivalent talent. But here's a more interesting question. What would have happened to a woman with her appearance and without her talent? The answer is she would have had a shorter career, less credibility, and less longevity. The talent was not optional. The appearance opened the door. The talent kept it open. And the strategy, the production company, the deliberate expansion of her power within the industry, the refusal to be defined by the most reductive version of what people wanted to see, is what will determine whether she becomes an enduring presence or a period piece. The 5-year business plan that a 12-year-old girl wrote in rural Idaho to convince her parents to let her try is in retrospect the best summation of who Sydney Sweeney is. Not the Instagram following, not the Emmy nominations, not the magazine covers, the plan, the methodical, rational, long horizon commitment to turning a dream that the town had no infrastructure to support into a reality that the industry had no category for. She built the category herself, and she's not done building it. What Sydney Sweeney represents in the larger landscape of her generation is something that gets talked about too rarely. The cost of being a woman in entertainment who is both visually prominent and intellectually serious, and who refuses to be only one of those things. The industry wants to sort people into legible boxes. Sydney has declined that sorting methodically and without drama, simply by continuing to do work that exceeds the box. At 28, she has more projects in development through her own production company than most producers twice her age. She is not waiting for permission. She is building the infrastructure that makes permission irrelevant. The 5-year business plan that a 12-year-old wrote in rural Idaho was not a document, it was a philosophy, and she is still following it.